All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating ancient text to really explore the deep and honestly highly practical philosophy behind the practice of Gayatri sadhana. We're going to look directly at what the source material actually says, kind of stripping away all those common misconceptions to understand the precise mechanics of how this ancient chanting is said to actually work. It's a complete explainer that bridges the gap between ancient mysticism and psychological science, and let me tell you, it is absolutely fascinating.
So I want you to consider this question for a second. What happens when cosmic sound waves physically rewire the human mind? This is the hook for our entire journey today. We're going to start way up at the macro, cosmic level of universal creation, and then follow this whole concept all the way down into the micro level of human psychology and our daily lives. The text frames this not as some kind of magic, but as a very systematic, almost scientific process of cause and effect.
Okay, Section 1, Cosmic Origins and the Concept of Universal Divine Energy.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the text defines the Gayatri mantra itself. The source explains that ancient sages, using this incredibly advanced state of what they call divine hearing, basically captured the literal echoes of universal energy moving through space. They then took those echoes and codified those specific cosmic sound waves into the 24 specific syllables of the Gayatri mantra. So according to the text, we're not just looking at letters on a page. They are literal acoustic representations of cosmic forces. It's wild.
And this foundational concept builds even further when we look at this massive cosmic collision between universal divine energy and the Panchtattvas, or the 5 elements of nature. The text says that when this supreme energy crashed into Akash, or ether, it generated foundational sound waves, which eventually became the mantra. When it collided with fire, it generated form. With wind, it generated touch. With water, taste. And with earth, smell. This intense collision is basically the foundational blueprint of the entire physical universe as described in the source.
So the absolutely crucial point to understand here is this. Because the human body and mind are made up of those exact same 5 elements, the act of chanting creates a literal resonance. The text describes this process as creating a rope or a bridge. By recreating these specific sound waves internally, human physical consciousness forms a direct link to that supreme divine consciousness. It's framed as a mechanism of connection, plain and simple.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, the internal transformation and altering the Antiquran.
So once that cosmic bridge is actually built, the text notes that it begins to radically alter the practitioner's inner self. And it brilliantly illustrates how that transformation happens. The text uses this super powerful analogy, like pebbles dropped into a full cup of water. Think about that for a second. If you keep dropping pebbles into a cup that is already completely full, the water has literally no choice but to spill out over the edges. In this analogy, the pebbles are satoguna, pure goodness and positive energy, and the water represents our negative habits and thoughts. The goodness physically displaces the bad.
You can really see this contrast clearly here. Before this transformation happens, the mind is just filled with negative thoughts, ill will, maybe even bad dreams. But as those pebbles of purity are dropped in, they forcefully displace all that negativity. The text claims this results in a massive surge of virtues, things like compassion, honesty, humility, and just an absolute sense of peace. The source strongly argues this internal shift naturally makes a person's life way more successful and harmonious overall. And the text uses a second really striking metaphor to explain this, like a glowing ember covered in ash. Imagine a super powerful burning coal that you just can't see because it's completely buried under a thick layer of dead gray ash. It looks totally cold and powerless from the outside, but that intense heat is still in there, right? It's just waiting for a little bit of oxygen.
What you should really take away from this is that the text emphasizes absolutely no external magic is required to gain spiritual power. You literally don't need a blessing from some outside entity. The practice of the mantra simply acts like the wind, blowing away the ash of impurities, bad habits, and ignorance. Once the ash is gone, the soul's inherent, extraordinary powers just naturally reveal themselves. The power was always yours. It was just covered up.
Now let's see how we apply this to the real world in Section 3. Overcoming the 3 sorrows and solving worldly problems. So the text explores how this profound internal shift solves some of the absolute most difficult worldly problems a human can face. And I really want to point out how organized this ancient wisdom is. It explicitly identifies these exact 3 pillars as the root causes of all human suffering. First up is ignorance, simply not knowing the truth. Second is weakness, meaning both physical and mental fragility. And third is lack or scarcity, that constant feeling of never having enough. According to the source, literally every misery you experience stems directly from one of these three things.
But here is exactly how the transformation fights back. The heightened purity from the practice acts as a natural remedy. True knowledge replaces ignorance, instantly clearing up confusion. Physical and mental vigor replaces weakness, making you resilient. And, honestly, most interestingly, self-restraint and capability replace scarcity. The text argues that when your desires are restrained and your capabilities are high, that nagging feeling of lack completely disappears. You just always feel like your treasury is full.
All right, moving to Section 4, Ultimate Spiritual Weapons and the Tools We Use for Challenges. The source uses some incredible, strong, mythological imagery to describe the tools you gain to combat life's hardest challenges. It introduces this concept of a kamadenu, a mythological, wish-fulfilling cow from ancient lore. The text metaphorically refers to Gayatri as a kamadenu, right here on Earth. It claims that drinking its metaphorical milk calms worldly greed entirely. By eliminating all those unnecessary and basically impossible desires, the practitioner naturally arrives at a state where all their genuine needs are met. It's this state of total fulfillment where your mind is finally, truly satisfied. Now, the text draws a really intense conceptual contrast right here. On one hand, we have worldly weapons, things like swords or dynamite used to blow up massive mountains or, tragically destroy human life. But on the flip side, the text positions the Gayatri as the Brahmastra, the ultimate spiritual weapon. Instead of destroying physical things, this spiritual dynamite actually targets and incinerates human misery, sin, and poverty, just burning them completely down to ashes. It's a weapon of liberation rather than destruction. And this translates to a massive real-world social impact. Because this inner purity is so powerful, it naturally radiates outward. The text actually states that a practitioner's environment changes so much that even hostile opponents and enemies naturally transform into cooperative friends and supporters. It literally compares it to cleaning out a really foul-smelling room and filling it with perfume. People are just naturally drawn to the new, pleasant atmosphere.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, The World as a Mirror.
This perfectly synthesizes our entire journey today, bringing all those vast cosmic principles directly down into our everyday human experience. This quote right here is the absolute core philosophical claim of the entire source text. The world is like a mirror in which we see our own reflection. The text insists that we are the true creators of our own circumstances. The good and bad situations we face, they aren't just random luck. They are literal reflections of our inner qualities, our character, and our daily actions. If we change the internal, utilizing these ancient practices, the external reflection absolutely has to change with it.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. If the world truly is a mirror, what is your inner world reflecting today? The source text tells us that the power to change that reflection lies entirely in our own hands, through this kind of structured internal transformation. I really hope this explainer gave you a clear, solid understanding of the deep mechanics behind this ancient wisdom. Keep learning, keep reflecting, and we'll see you next time.